All right, I'm going to share with you a couple of things tonight. Since I can't take pictures inside a federal courtroom, I'm going to describe the scene for you, a glimpse behind the scene. And I'm also going to show you startling journalistic malpractice, at the very least, by WMBB and how they reported the not guilty verdict. It's a very, very big deal. Why are they poisoning the community with its toxic propaganda? Why are they doing this? I think I know why, but I don't know for sure. But it's worse than that. WMBB was, I believe, based on information and belief, and I think we'll get a chance to prove it to you, that they were basically reading as news what the prosecutors were giving them. Do you know how bad that is? In my view, it's criminal. Now, I had a bigger production set up for you, but I think I'm going to do this in smaller bites, is what I think I'm going to do. Tomorrow, I plan to share with you the testimony, the transcripts of the testimony, the witnesses. For example, Chris Forehand is the contracted engineer for the city of Lynn Haven, and for many cities, right? And he took the witness stand, and there was all kinds of stuff that occurred between Michael White's testimony, the former city manager who was up there in prison garb with handcuffs and shackles, and their testimonies didn't match. And they were the government's witnesses, the prosecuting witnesses. James Finch was only down to one count, giving a $5,000 bribe to Michael White, who was up there, and to bring him out of prison to put him up there. And what he said is not what Chris Forehand said. But tomorrow I'm going to share the details of that with you, to include the $3,500 in $100 bills that the city contracted engineer, Chris Forehand, gave to Michael White, the city manager, who was his good buddy, that he was involved in talking the city council into hiring Michael White. And then Michael White, well, let's just say Chris Forehand said on the witness stand that it was good for Panhandle Engineering, his company, that Michael White, his buddy, was the city manager. And so what's this $3,500 in cash all about? Nobody ever accused Finch of giving them cash. They asked both city managers, Michael White and Joel Schubert, did Finch ever offer you anything of value? No. For 3 days, I waited to see a crime that was committed, but the prosecutors never showed one, ever. And that's what the jury said. The only potential crimes that I saw were from government witnesses, and one of them is in prison. The government did not even call up the guy who supposedly took the bribe. So they said there was a $5,000 bribe. They said, don't take into consideration that all the votes were unanimous and they were all recommended by the city attorney and the city manager and the staff, and that it was one hell of a deal. You're not supposed to take any of that into account. You're only supposed to listen to the guy who was drinking like this. And it was, I actually had a tinge of sympathy for Michael White, believe it or not. When I saw him on the witness stand, his hands were handcuffed. And this is how he had to drink. Wow. And that was the prosecutor's main witness. Sheriff Tommy Ford and the FBI have never indicted or gone after anybody for stuff that happened after Hurricane Michael. This was all stuff prior to Hurricane Michael. And remember how crazy many of you thought I was. Look, I hear things. Right? The shadow knows. I heard that you had people talking, some of whom even like me, who were saying, why is Bernie defending these people? 79 counts, and Bernie's telling us that they're all bogus? What's gotten into Bernie? He must be on Finch's payroll. It's what current city manager, Vicki Gainer, it's what she told the FBI. I was right. I didn't think that when I first met with Margo Anderson and James Finch. I did not think that out of 79 counts, they didn't do any of them. But that's how it played out. When I saw it, I told you. People said, you're crazy. No, I'm telling you the truth. So I'm going to share with you the stuff now. Tomorrow I'm going to read. And listen, I called Chris Forehand, and to his credit, he stepped out of a really nice and important family dinner to take my call today. And part of the testimony was that $3,500 in cash that Chris Forehand, the city contracted engineer, gave to Michael White. What's that about? Michael White said it was a Christmas gift given to him in a pickup truck. And then Chris Forehand said, no, I paid him. I hired him, hired the city manager to create a corporate handbook, and I paid him in cash for it. Now, there's no receipts, no invoices, nothing like that. It was just sort of a side gig. And so the defense attorneys asked, did you tell the FBI that? And Chris Forehand said, yes, I did. Did they ask to see it? Now, the FBI didn't ask to see it. Why would the FBI not ask? Why are the investigators? Did Sheriff Tommy Ford and the Public Trust Unit, did they ask to see it? They had their best guy on this. No. When Vicki Gainer told the FBI that Bernie Thompson's on Finch's payroll, and that's the only reason he's carrying their water and defending him, did the FBI say, where'd you hear that? No. It was almost like the FBI memos were written by the prosecutors and witnesses were told to sign them. That's almost like it was written that way. I would think the best and the brightest at the sheriff's office and at the FBI would have follow-up questions, but they didn't. Never asked me, never asked anybody. So I had to investigate myself. And as I told you at the time, Finch had never given me a penny. Bernie Thompson's not doing this because he's getting envelopes of cash or even checks with loan written in the memo. I only am able to do this because some of you crowdfund and some of you are brave enough to sponsor the show. But it was amazing, and I'm going to read to you exactly what I saw behind the scenes, and we're going to take a look at WMBBs. So I'm not trained in law enforcement in any way, but I could, do a better job if I was told. And Chris Forehand, by the way, has immunity on one of the issues, which is world claim. It was an insurance issue, but there were like 5 different issues. Chris Forehand has immunity with regard to only world claim. Now, the FBI said, I'll read all that to you tomorrow. So he's got immunity on that issue. But this corporate handbook, and so I called Chris Forehand. He answered the phone today. And I said, was it in digital form or paper form? Is digital form. Did you implement it? Yes. Chris said, yes, we did. Are you still using it? Yes, we are. Can I see it? Can I get a copy? Chris Forehand said, sure, I'll send you a copy. So maybe I'll get it before the show tomorrow and I can show you this corporate handbook. But the stories were different from Chris Forehand and the main witness to the whole thing, Michael White. WMBB's coverage was as non-curious or crooked as the investigators were. They lacked the most important thing in any investigation, and that is curiosity.
When your life is on the line, hire the lawyer who lives in our community, works in our community, and worships in our community. I'm Salene, your Panama City Beach lawyer. 850-215-0628.
By the way, I'm going to check right after this. Tell me if the volume is better today. If it's not cutting in and out, let me know.
You want to look good? You want to feel good? Little John's Big and Tall is where it's at. Right across the street from Sky's Pizza Pie, 5700 North Davis Highway. You can find out more online at littlejohnsbigandtall.com. He's also a member of the iTex trading community, where your iTex dollars are welcome.
All right. Volume's great. Perfect. Okay, let's do this. Let me start by giving you a little glimpse of what I saw sitting in the gallery right behind the defendant, James Finch, and the prosecutors, right? I'm going to show you this. Now, remember, James Finch was tried in, they had 2 cracks at this. All this evidence about the Bonnie and Clyde of Bay County. And 2 juries said, we don't buy it. The first jury in March, it was a hung jury. It was a mistrial. So the Fed said, well, we get another crack at it. And about 7 months later, I think, they got another crack at it. And that jury said, not guilty. So what I want to do, is share with you what it looked like behind the scenes. All right. This was in the first trial in March. Now, I don't know. I wish this was bigger. I don't know if you can see it, but let me describe to you the scene. James Finch, this was in March, and it was the same just last week. James Finch sits in the hot seat. It's a green leather and mahogany chair to the left of his attorneys, facing Chief Judge Mark Walker. He wears a black blazer, an untucked gray shirt, jeans, and black loafers. I'm sitting behind him, front row, middle of the gallery. Finch is at my 10 o'clock. Finch is antsy. By the end of the week, he could be in prison for the rest of his life. There's a big diamond ring on his right ring finger, and in his right hand is a rolled up napkin. He squeezes it and rolls it around in his palm like a tiny white blanket. He dabs his nose with it in the courtroom the same way others who are cold are doing since the room is chilly. I have my jacket off. Mostly, though, Finch dangles his right arm over the chair, kneading the napkin. Finch's hair is black and combed down. Let's see. I want to make sure I can make the slides. Let's see. I want to make sure I can make these slides go. I haven't used the slide before. There we go. Finch's hair is black and combed down. His bangs are like a Roman emperor, but not really. His eyes are blue and often averted to the wall or down at the forest green carpet. Now, I know the carpet is actually forest green rather than that weird shade of green I had described earlier because Sarah Moon told me so. Ashley Finch, James's wife, confirmed it. So we're going with forest green for sure. And Finch is shifting in his seat like somebody waiting for the number to be called at the DMV. At 73, Finch is 73, the wrinkles in his face look more like creases today. Either he's dehydrated or he's held that same expression for way too long. The defense were calling up character witnesses. These were men who had known him for 50 years, 40 years, and for a long time. Each of the Southern gentlemen explains how Finch built up the community over the years and with roads and buildings and infrastructure, always on time and always under budget, and sometimes with his own money. Mostly, they talk about how Finch taught them to be better producers in their own crafts. They say that you can count on Finch like clockwork. Defense attorney Guy Lewis, in March, speeds through about 7 witnesses before lunchtime. The jury paid attention to the first 5. But the jury did not resonate too much with their country club demeanor. Let's just say that their dinner tabs probably differ by a 0 or 2 from those seated in the jury box. Now, the next character witness was a plot twist. This man sauntered right by the jury with a dark hoodie and black pants. One thing you knew before he ever got to the witness stand was that Willie Carpenter takes his time. Willie B, as his friends call him, said he grew up with Finch in Panama City. They were best friends as kids, and he must have been a skinny kid, Willie B, because today he could turn sideways and slip out of a jail cell if the guard wasn't paying attention. He and Finch graduated together from Bay High in 1970. Willie told the jury that now he lives near the 17th Street ditch over in that part of town. We came up through life together, drag racing, Willie said. He'd come to my house and my mom would feed him collard greens. Even Finch smiled. The jury chuckled and looked over at Finch. The jury liked Willie, who has a face like Sammy Davis Jr. when Sammy was older. He told the jury that Finch is straight up people. Willie's neighborhood had a dangerous ditch along the road for more than 40 years. Willie said he had wrecked in it once, and 10 more people did too. One lady crashed in the ditch and died. But local politicians had no interest in fixing that ditch, he said, at least not on the east side where he lived. It was big and it was deep. There were snakes and alligators in it, Willie said. But that all changed in 2016 when then city manager Joel Schubert and Finch decided to fix it now. By 2017, Finch had the dangerous stretch of road along the ditch fixed in a single year. It's beautiful now, Willie said. But no good deed goes unpunished in Bay County. Prosecutors are determined to throw Finch in prison over the 17th Street ditch project. They said that Finch made millions by bribing Commissioner Antonius Barnes with checks totaling $45,000, which Barnes deposited as loans into his fledgling insurance business bank account. Prosecutors told the jury that it doesn't matter that commissioners voted unanimously in 2016 to fix the 17th Street ditch after it was recommended by staff and city manager Joel Schubert. In fact, the city commission always voted unanimously to award Finch projects over the years if he had the lowest bid. Finch saved the city a ton of money by financing the 17th Street ditch project himself. The city didn't want to borrow $3.7 million from a bank at 6.5%. So Finch loaned the money to the city at only 2.5% for 25 years to pay him back. He even told the city, "Don't worry about starting to pay me back until I finish the project," which he did in April 2017. Now, just one more thing about the loan. The next year, city manager Michael White asked Finch if he would please loan the city another $790,000 for a different project, but add it to the same mortgage, since the interest rate was so low. Finch obliged and said that they could even take 30 years to pay him back. Now, the new project was being pushed by Vicki Gainer, the city's grant and contract manager at the time. She wanted the storm drains fixed around Colorado Street, Mississippi Street, and Texas Street. Not long afterward, Vicki Gainer got promoted to city manager and bought a home in that area where Finch fixed the storm drains for her back to the courtroom and Finch's childhood friend, Willie B. When asked on the witness stand if he and Finch were still friends, Willie nodded and said he'd do anything for me and I'd do anything for him. Next up was Ron Sharp, the executive director for Arc of the Bay. He tells the jury that they teach job skills and other attributes to people with autism, spinal bifida, and sensory disabilities. It's not an easy task and resources are scarce. The Arc of the Bay doesn't get much funding from state or local government. We're the forgotten agency, he said. But Finch doesn't forget. Sharp said that Finch has donated about $1 million over the years. After Sharp's testimony, prosecutor Andrew Grogan cross-examined him, asking about the tax deductions that Finch gets. The implication, of course, is that Finch's motivation is greed. He just wants to pay less taxes. Now, prosecutors told the jury that Finch is very wealthy, and he didn't get that way without friends in government who are eager to steer contracts his way in exchange for bribes. Prosecutors said that bribes aren't always sacks of cash or envelopes dropped off in back rooms, trucks, or restaurants. Prosecutors said that Finch did it in plain sight by writing checks to Commissioner Barnes disguised as business loans. The jury was told to ignore the fact that Barnes was never the deciding vote, or that the commission voted unanimously after being vetted by city attorney Robert Jackson and recommended by city manager Joel Schubert. The prosecutors kept reminding the jury that Finch is really, really rich. Finch is so wealthy, they said, that he even has his own private jet. They asked the first few wealthy character witnesses if they'd ever been on Finch's jet. One of them said yes. Now, the only character witness that prosecutors did not cross-examine was Willie B. The jury loved him. And when it was over, and they were waiting for a verdict, which ended up being hung jury in March, Finch walked over to me in the courtroom, and he said, "I wish they'd have asked Willie if he'd been on my plane." Finch later told me with a smile about his longtime friend. He wiped his bangs. Finch wiped his bangs over to one side, shaking his head. "You know what I'm talking about? Them sons of bitches." Now, the jury deliberated in March for 2 days, but could not reach a unanimous decision. The hung jury resulted in a mistrial, and so prosecutors would schedule a second trial for another crack at putting Finch in prison. And 7 months later, this past week, Finch was in the hot seat again for the same bribery charge. But this time, on October 26, the jury took about an hour to find him not guilty. Now, is that something? I am going to share with you next WMBB's story from last week on Thursday. You're not going to believe how long it took them in their written copy to say that James Finch was found not guilty. Take a guess. Paragraph 1, paragraph 2, 3, 4. How long did it take Brady Calhoun and WMBB to tell its audience? And what was the headline? I'll show you right after this.
You want to look good? You want to feel good? Little John's Big and Tall is where it's at. Right across the street from Sky's Pizza Pie, 5700 North Davis Highway. You can find out more online at littlejohnsbigandtall.com. He's also a member of the iTex trading community, where your iTex dollars are welcome. Don't let back pain and neck pain get you down. Find relief at Brown Chiropractic Center on St. Andrews Boulevard in Panama City. Dr. Sherry Brown helps people heal naturally with chiropractic adjustments and deep tissue massage. Call 769-3777.
All right, here's WMBB's news story. Look at the headline. Hold on, let me Look at this headline. Verdict reached in Lynn Haven corruption case. Does that tell you the story? Is that, I mean, what headline would you write with no journalistic training? What headline does the community deserve to see? You're not going to believe what I'm going to show you. Now, I asked you to guess what paragraph WMBB got around to telling its readers that Finch was found not guilty after they had been beating the drums for nearly 4 years, lying to the community for nearly 4 years, and still doing it. Here it is. You ready for this? A jury in a federal bribery trial asked 2 questions of Judge Mark Walker during their deliberations Thursday. They wanted to know why Antonius Barnes, the man who was accused of taking bribes from business owner James Finch, did not testify, and they wanted to know if he had an immunity deal. Federal prosecutors accused Finch, the owner of Phoenix Construction, of bribing Barnes, a former Lynn Haven city commissioner, with $45,000 in checks over several years. Barnes and Finch maintained that the money was a business loan. We're now on paragraph 4. Barnes eventually took a plea deal in the case and agreed to cooperate with the government. But at the first trial, he refused to testify that the money was a bribe, saying only that it was a business loan from an old friend. That trial ended in a hung jury. We're on paragraph 5 now. Is this amazing? WMBB is still making the case against him. During a second trial this week, this was on Thursday, prosecutors declined to call Barnes. The defense didn't call him either. And in closing arguments, Finch's defense attorney, Jennifer Lukemeyer, asked the jury to consider that the man who should have been a key witness in the case never took the stand. We're on paragraph, is this 6? When the jury returned to Walker with that specific question about Barnes, he told them he could not explain the issue to them. Judge Walker said the jury could only consider the evidence presented to them at the trial and that they could not use any other evidence or explanation by the judge to make their decision. Oh, here we go, finally, but look how they frame it. A few minutes later, they came back with a not guilty verdict. Now look at this. Watch this. Outside the courtroom, after the verdict, Judge Walker spoke to the jurors in private about their decision, and he relayed back to the attorneys that the fact that Barnes did not testify was the key factor in their decision. Did Finch's attorneys tell WMBB that, or did the prosecutors tell WMBB that? I bet you I know, because I'll bet you their PR team wrote this. And I'll give you more evidence that suggests that as we go along here. Outside the courtroom, look at this. Outside the courtroom, Finch celebrated with his supporters and promised retribution against some of the people who he believed worked against him. Finch did not name who would face the lawsuits, but he did say that he's concerned with the current management of the city of Lynn Haven. So that's far enough as we break this down. So WMBB doesn't tell you till paragraph 7 that Finch was not guilty, but they don't just say it. They frame it like, oh man, all these crazy things happened. And finally, the jury just didn't have enough information, and so they gave a not guilty verdict. And now Finch is coming after people. That's how WMBB frames this, because I don't think they wrote this copy. Do you know we learned through the documents that the U.S. Attorney's Office spent nearly $500,000 hiring a PR firm? And I believe, based on information and belief, that the prosecutors were sending copy or their story to WMBB. I'll show you one reason that I think that. You ready for this? This, if you look at it says updated at 5:36, but an hour and a half earlier when the verdict came out, WMBB posted an actual story. And then they replaced it with this propaganda. The actual story is way down here. Look at this. Do you see that? A previous version of the story is below. Wait a minute. So WMBB reported the story and then 2.5 hours later got a totally different version and shoved the real story to the bottom of the page that nobody would see unless they're curious with a hound dog's nose like I am. Here's the real version of the story. You ready? Look at the very first paragraph. The very first sentence is exactly what it ought to be. A jury has found local business owner not guilty of bribery. Now, they should have said James Finch in there, but they say it in the next paragraph. Federal prosecutors accuse James Finch. But see that? The first line. So why did they replace it with this? Why would they do that? Is WMBB incompetent? I think they're not real good, but they're not incompetent. Evidence is shoved down at the bottom of the page. Is WMBB petty? Yes, very. When the judge read the not guilty verdict, you should have seen a reporter Brady Calhoun's face. He was so, it looked like his face was contorted with contempt. You know why? Because they had been leading you down the road that this Bonnie and Clyde team were guilty as all get out. And now they had to come back and tell you not guilty, so they shove it down to the 7th paragraph. Are they incompetent? Are they petty? Or are they on the take? How much money did WMBB get from the U.S. Attorney's Office from the $500,000 they paid to Sachs Media? Wouldn't you like to see how many invoices WMBB got from Sachs Media? It's probably very much like how many invoices do they have from parent companies of WMBB that come from Panama City Beach Mayor Mark Sheldon that he gets from the TDC to put on Gulf Coast Jam. I believe WMBB will poison its own community. Oh, how much money did WMBB get from a nonprofit? You want to, Bernie, you're going to have to prove what you're saying. All right. Will somebody post a link right now in the thread? Go to sunbiz.org. Sunbiz.org is the Florida Secretary of State website where you can look up businesses, okay? Please, somebody go to sunbiz.org, okay? And then you'll see a tab that says Search Records. Click on that. And then when you search records, search for the name. It'll say name, search name of the business. And type in Panhandle Strong. Sunbiz.org, search records, name Panhandle Strong. It's a nonprofit that was started by Panama City Beach Mayor Mark Sheldon when he was on the planning board. And they were plotting and scheming as far back as then for him to replace Mike Thomas, who was going to not run again. So when WMBB does a news report and says, Panhandle Strong, how much was the nonprofit paying WMBB to say Panhandle Strong? I don't know the answer. But I'm sniffing around. And I smell something coming out of WMBB, and it's rancid. Wouldn't you like to know how much they told the FBI I was on the take? Vicki Gainer did. And the FBI just put it in a memo, memorialized it without asking any questions about it. Oh, they probably got a search warrant and looked me up, I suppose. Around that time, the sheriff's office surrounded my home. Sheriff Tommy Ford sent oh my goodness, it's just crazy as hell. You saw the video, right? More than like 3 million people have seen it by now. Sheriff Tommy Ford sent prowlers. One of them was in a Bay County Sheriff's deputy uniform. Corporal Nicholas Macias, and investigator Alvin Eiler. They were prowlers in my backyard for 8 minutes, peeping in windows. No warrant. Right when I started to report that their main public trust, the head of the public trust unit, got a motorcycle, got a Harley Davidson from their main target, Derwin White. I was before, though, so they were mad at me, and then my name starts showing up. I would love to know how much WMBB gets to poison its own community, Panhandle Strong, with toxic PR to cover malicious persecution and perhaps to protect the real criminals. Let's watch Tom Lewis. Let's watch Huey Lewis in the news here. The news director for WMBB. Oh, hold on. All right. There we go. I thought I lost it. Now, he's reading from the original copy, so he'll say Finch was found not guilty first. At least the broadcast got that part right. But listen to his tone and listen to all of the excuses leading up to why he was found not guilty. Now, I'm going to tell you something else I'll need to explain more down the road. But the prosecutors got they got dressed down a few times from Judge Walker. And the prosecutors almost threw the whole case at the very end when they were talking to the jury, asking the jury to vote guilty. Because the number one golden rule of a prosecutor, first thing they learn is when they're talking to a jury, you better not shift the burden to the defendants. So when WMBB and the prosecutors say, basically when the defense properly tells the jury, look, the prosecutors didn't even bring the guy in here that they accuse of taking a bribe. The defense can do that because they have no burden. They don't even have to say anything during the entire trial. The entire burden is on the prosecutors. But the prosecutor went up there, Mr. Keene, and at the very end, he told the jury, hey, if there's one thing you should know, if there's only one thing you remember, he really set it up. Then he said, they could have called him too. They got subpoena power. How did that happen? Did you see a thumb pop up on my screen? How did that happen? What was that? They said the defense, they could have called him too. They shifted the burden to the defense, to the jury, and both defense attorneys jumped up and yelled, objection. And Chief Judge Mark Walker said, sidebar right now. The objection was sustained, but Judge Walker said that the prosecutors came perilously close to a mistrial by shifting the burden to the defendants, which WMBB is also going to do. It's the golden rule. It's an automatic mistrial. And some people think, and I think it has real credibility, some people think that the prosecutors knew they were on the losing end, and at the very end, they attempted to screw up so bad that the judge would declare a mistrial and they would string James Finch on for another several months and try him for a third time. So when you hear Tom Lewis right now talking about the defendants could have called Antonius Barnes as well, they're shifting the burden. That is prosecutorial malpractice. And now you're about to see right now Tom Lewis commit journalistic malpractice by doing the same damn thing. All right, let's see if I can get this up here. Here we go. All right, go ahead, Tom Lewis, take it away.
Jury found James Finch not guilty of one count of bribery today. Finch celebrated out. A federal jury found James Finch not guilty of one count of bribery today. Finch celebrated outside of the courtroom after the verdict was read, noting that the process has taken 5 years. Federal prosecutors accused Finch of bribing Antonius Barnes, who was a Lynn Haven commissioner at the time, with a $45,000 payment over several years. Barnes pled guilty to a lesser charge, but refused.
Hold on. I want to correct this. That is not what he was on trial for. Now, that's part of the story, but he was on trial for a second time over one single $5,000 check. All right? He was not, they're wrong. He was not standing trial for $45,000.
Refused to testify that the money was a bribe.
Okay.
Finch maintained.
Hold on. Oh, I'm sorry. They just said, actually, I'm going to let this roll and I will correct it in the printed version. I'm sorry. Let's do this again. I'll shut up.
A federal jury found James Finch not guilty of one count of bribery today. Finch celebrated outside of the courtroom after the verdict was read, noting that the process has taken 5 years. Federal prosecutors accused Finch of bribing Antonius Barnes, who was a Lynn Haven commissioner at the time, with a $45,000 payment over several years. Barnes pled guilty to a lesser charge, but refused to testify that the money was a bribe. He and Finch maintained the payments were business loans so that Finch could start an insurance business. Given Barnes' testimony during the previous trial, the government...
Okay, I have to stop it there because this is not in print. Tom Lewis, WMBB, just said that Finch made a $45,000 payment over time to Barnes so that Finch could start an insurance company. That is, they know that's a lie. They know that's it. They've been reporting on this for 3 years. Antonius Barnes is the one who was starting an insurance company and needed help. And Finch wrote him a series of smaller checks that totaled $5,000. But listen to WMBB say that Finch was trying to start an insurance company. This is unbelievable.
Decided not to recall him as a witness this time around. The defense did not call Barnes to testify either. During deliberations, jurors came back and asked the judge, Mark Walker, why Barnes was not testifying if he had immunity. And Walker said that those are questions he could not answer, and the jurors would just have to determine the case based on the evidence that was presented during the trial.
No shit, Tom.
Finch was not guilty. Outside of the courtroom, Finch said the verdict was overdue.
You know, the people that knew me, my friends, and
By the way, look what Brady Calhoun does. Now, I also interviewed Finch, but I put him in. Look, I've got a master's degree in journalism. They teach us when you interview somebody to put them in a place that looks like professional, where the lighting is decent, where they don't look innocent or guilty. Look what Brady Calhoun faces Finch toward the sun and does this. Now, tomorrow I'll show you my interview with Finch. But even this right here is journalistic malpractice.
stuff like that. they didn't have any problem. They knew if anything that I wasn't going to do is do something wrong to the city of Little Haven or the people that live there.
8 other people were involved in the overall Lynn Haven corruption investigation. All 8 pled guilty. Finch is the only one who is not guilty in this case.
All right, so let's go back to this part.
To a lesser.
Listen when they say that Finch loaned the money so that Finch could start an insurance company. Again, Barnes asked Finch for a business loan for the fledgling insurance company that Barnes was trying to start up. They just outright lie to the people.
Charge, but refused to testify that the money was a bribe. He and Finch maintained the payments were business loans so that Finch could start an insurance business. Given.
Is that amazing? All right, so now what I'm going to do is we're going to go back to the printed version of this. All right, so let me awkwardly get us back there.
Barnes's testimony during the previous trial, the government decided.
All right, let's take a look at this printed version. See if I can get it bigger for you so you can read this. All right. Now, we're going to break this down. They don't say, the headline, let's look at all of the elements of journalistic malpractice and worse. Verdict reached in Lynn Haven corruption case. Okay? It doesn't say not guilty. It just says verdict reached in the corruption. That people can easily infer that whoever it is in big trouble. All right? They don't say not guilty till paragraph 7. But this time I'm going to point out all of the lies because they've been covering this for too long to know these aren't lies. A jury in a federal bribery trial asked 2 questions of Judge Mark Walker during their deliberations on Thursday. That should be nowhere near the beginning of this story. It's part of the story. They wanted to know why Antonius Barnes, the owner, why Finch, the owner of Phoenix Construction, federal prosecutors accused Finch, the owner of Phoenix Construction, of bribing Barnes, a former Lynn Haven city commissioner, with $45,000 in checks over several years. That was not the charge. Count 2, the only remaining count, was a $5,000 check. Barnes and Finch maintained that the money was a business loan. By the way, the feds put Barnes in prison for 45 days for failure to list a business loan. The feds called it a business loan. Barnes eventually took a plea deal in the case and agreed to cooperate with the government. That's not even true. Finch took a plea deal because they dropped all the bullshit charges and said, look, you didn't list the loan on a business application. That's what they did. And in order to get that plea deal, defendants don't agree to testify or cooperate with the government. Instead, they agree to tell the truth, which Barnes maintains he has done at great cost to Barnes. Barnes could have said that it was a bribe and not gone to prison for 45 days. But he was willing to make that sacrifice to tell the truth. During the second trial this week, prosecutors declined to call Barnes. Prosecutors did not decline to call Barnes. They chose not to call Barnes. They're in the driver's seat. This makes it sound like there was pressure, but they declined to do it. No, they chose not to do it because he didn't take a bribe. The defense did not call him either. Oh, so now WMBB is also shifting the burden. And in closing arguments, defense attorney Jennifer Lukemeyer asked the jury to consider that the man who should have been a key witness in the case never took the stand. It's a very important element, WMBB. In order to have a bribe, you got to bring the guy who took the bribe that you put in prison, don't you think? When the jury returned to Walker with that specific question about Barnes, this was a much brighter jury, by the way, much more put together and professional looking. The judge told them that he could not explain the issue to them. Judge Walker said the jury could only consider the evidence presented to them at the trial, and they could not use any other evidence or explanation by the judge to make their decision. Just like every case, WMBB, That's the law. That's how it works. They are implying that something different was done here than in other federal prosecutions. This is exactly what the prosecutor said. And this is their replacement story. A few minutes later, they came back in with paragraph 7 says not guilty verdict. After the verdict, Walker spoke with the jurors in private about their decision, and he relayed back to the attorneys the fact that Barnes did not testify was a key factor in their decision. Who told WMBB that? The defense attorneys or the prosecutors? I bet it was the prosecutors, because they were upset that that was their decision. But of course, prosecutors, if you're not going to bring the guy who took the bribe, it's a weak case. Outside the courtroom, Finch celebrated with his supporters. Look at this. And Finch promises retribution. WMBB calls it retribution, a man who faced persecution, vindictive persecution. And he wants to be made whole again and have his reputation partially restored, or to be paid for the damages done to him. And WMBB calls it retribution. What do you think of that? Even when it's not just Bernie Thompson or the Beacon of Bay County telling you the truth, even when a jury comes back within an hour, it was about an hour, WMBB is still clinging to the lie. That's how much contempt they have for you. As long as they're getting paid by whoever the hell they're getting paid by, is it Sachs Media, which was paid $500,000 by the prosecutors to do PR, or is it Mark Sheldon with his nonprofit Panhandle Strong, WMBB Panhandle Strong? That's Mark Sheldon paying them. Where's that money coming from and flowing to WMBB? Do you ever wonder these things? Anyway, you can read the rest of this. It's just so disgusting. People say, Bernie, you got to feel good that you're vindicated, right? You know, and yeah, it's better than it coming out opposite the way I've been telling you. And I suppose I do. But that doesn't make me feel any better that we live in a community with vindictive persecution against the whistleblowers. And we have WMBB working hand in hand with them to create caricatures of people so they can replace them with other mayors or county commissioners. You talk about election interference. That doesn't make me feel so hot. That's as dirty as it gets in good old Bay County. Okay. You know, there's something going on too. I want to share with you. There's something going on right now in Panama City Beach. They've got almost a $240 million budget. That's how much they're spending. The government, Panama City Beach. 2 years ago, they were spending $42 million. Now they're spending $246 million. If you wonder why your assessments have gone up so much, it's because Mayor Mark Sheldon wants a bridge so that his Gulf Coast Jam customers can get a better deal. Look at this. Mayor Mark Sheldon is pushing for a $10 million pedestrian bridge to connect Frank Brown Park to Aaron Besant Park. It's great for music festivals. It's the city's #1 priority this year. They've got a bunch of projects, and they plan to spend $236 million. 2 years ago, the budget for the city was only $42 million. That's why locals are paying so much more in assessments to the city. Mayor Sheldon says it's worth it. After all, he owns Gulf Coast Jam. The city's #1 priority will benefit his music festivals. He wants more state and federal grant money as a slush fund. Call your legislators. Say no to Sheldon schemes. Say no to the Boondoggle Bridge. And then I've got a bunch of stuff to tell you about Mexico Beach because I haven't been able to keep you up on that. That's off the chain crazy. So we got some catching up to do this week. and I'll do my best. I want to thank the Unknown Patriot for your support, and also all of you who throw a tip my way in the tip jar. I should create a way to support the show called the Watchdog Tip Jar. That's an idea. Hey, Bernie, how about getting paid for what you do? You can support my efforts by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Bernie Thompson. It is monthly, as little as $5 a month. It is easy. It's anonymous, and you can quit at any time. Patreon.com/Bernie Thompson. Thank you to those of you who do that. I don't say that enough. All right, with that, I'm going to wrap it up, and I got lots to share with you. There's all kinds of stuff to share with you this week, and I'll be back tomorrow.